Thugs harass a 91-year-old veteran, but they didn't know a royal guard was watching everything. The sun hung high over the Grand Palace, illuminating its white walls and golden spires in a dazzling display that drew visitors from miles away. Tourists lined in front of the imposing gates, their cameras clicking to capture glimpses of the royal guards on duty. The crisp uniforms of these guards, tall hats, shining buttons, and impeccable posture, were symbols of national pride. Amongst them was James Holt, who stood rigid near the palace gate, his uniform crisp and his expression solemn. He was used to polite tourists passing by, snapping photos, and whispering about the disciplined royal guards. On most days he barely moved a muscle, obeying strict protocol that demanded absolute stillness unless a genuine threat appeared. But today felt different. An odd tension hung in the air, tugging at his instincts. From the corner of his eye, James noticed a small group of rough-looking men loitering near an elderly gentleman. The old man, slightly hunched, wore a neat jacket adorned with medals. Even at a distance, James sensed the medals were real, commemorating a lifetime of service. Something about the scene pricked at his conscience. While three of the men snickered among themselves, the fourth eyed the elderly man's medals with unsettling interest. James forced himself to keep his posture. Royal guards did not rush in over minor quarrels. Yet his gaze stayed locked on the group. The old man suddenly stumbled on his cane, and one of the men let out a mocking laugh. "Watch your step, Grandpa," the tallest thug said, stepping into the man's path. The veteran steadied himself. "I'm fine, thank you," he replied curtly. His voice carried an undertone of dignity that belied his frailty. James shifted his stance an inch. Normally, he wouldn't move without clear cause, but he couldn't ignore a potential threat to a defenseless old soldier. Over the years, he'd mastered the art of reading body language. Right now, every signal from that group said they were looking for trouble. "Nice medals," another thug piped in. "They real, old man?" Marcus Turner, though James didn't know his name yet, touched his medals protectively. "They are," he said, his tone polite but guarded. "They represent years of service." One of the men snorted. "Service to what? Some ancient war?" He reached out and flicked one medal with a grimy finger. "Please don't do that," Marcus said, drawing back. A flash of sadness passed over his face, as though the disrespect cut deeper than any insult. James felt a flicker of anger. Those medals meant courage, sacrifice, qualities he valued. He wanted to stride over immediately. Still, protocol warred with his conscience. If these men hadn't physically attacked the palace or threatened a dignitary, he wasn't technically required to intervene. Yet he couldn't stand still while an elderly veteran was being mocked and pushed around. Marcus tried to sidestep them. "Excuse me," he murmured, tapping his cane forward. "Not so fast," the tall thug snapped. He shoved Marcus's shoulder. "Where do you think you're going?" A few bystanders paused, uncertain whether to intervene. One woman looked at James, clearly expecting him to do something. He inhaled slowly, jaw tightening. This was the moment. He could either follow the strict letter of his orders or uphold the moral duty instilled in him from day one of training. He made his choice. In a fluid motion, James broke formation and stepped away from the palace gate. Several tourists gasped or pointed, surprised to see a royal guard moving outside the usual ceremonial routine. One of James's fellow guards caught his eye, silently questioning him. James gave a slight nod, as if to say, "I'll handle this." He approached the small group, posture still upright, voice firm. "Leave him alone." The thugs turned, startled by the abrupt command. The tall one sneered. "You talking to us?" James ignored the snide tone. "He asked you to let him pass," he said, locking eyes with the ringleader. A flicker of shock crossed their faces. Perhaps they expected a guard never to speak. Marcus, breathing a little faster, glanced at James with relief and worry intermixed. He gripped his cane more tightly, as if bracing for what might happen next. One of the other men laughed. "What's your problem, soldier boy? We're just having a conversation with the old man." His smirk contradicted the claim of harmless conversation. James's voice remained calm. Trouble or not, harassing him ends now. The tall thug's smirk faded into something more aggressive. He took a step closer to James, arms tensing. Or what? You'll arrest us? He glanced around mockingly. Where's the rest of your buddies? Standing like statues? James didn't move an inch. I don't need backup to stop you. His quiet confidence put a crack in their bravado. The ringleader hesitated. But instead of walking away, he suddenly lunged forward, swiping at Marcus's chest. Maybe I'll take one of these medals as a souvenir. Marcus gasped, trying to protect his medals. Before the thug's hand could tear any off, James caught the man's wrist. Not going to happen, he said, voice low and edged with warning. For a split second, they locked eyes. The thug grunted, attempting to jerk free. James tightened his grip, controlling the man's arm without unnecessary force. Another thug cursed and stepped behind James, apparently thinking he could catch the guard off balance. Marcus cried out, "Look out!" James pivoted, releasing the first man's wrist in the same motion. He blocked the second attacker's arm with a quick sweep, then pushed him back. The second thug stumbled, nearly tripping over his own feet. "Get him!" the tall thug barked, regaining composure and gesturing for the others to join in. They circled, but James stood firm. Tourists backed away, some filming the confrontation with their phones. Tension soared. Marcus, though shaken, tried to position himself to avoid being shoved around again. One of the men lunged from behind. James spun, deflecting the blow with a sharp twist of his arm. The man yelped, stumbling sideways. Within seconds, it became clear these thugs were outmatched, no matter how many times they lunged. Finally, the tall leader stepped back, panting. He exchanged glances with his pals. They realized this guard wasn't just a ceremonial figure. He knew how to defend himself. "Let's bail," muttered one of them, rubbing his bruised forearm. The leader glowered at James, then at Marcus. "You got lucky, old man." He spat on the ground. "Next time, no fancy guard to save you." They stalked off, muttering under their breath. Some spectators cheered softly. Others clustered around, relieved that violence had been kept in check. Marcus exhaled a long, trembling breath, shoulders sagging in relief. James turned to him, concern replacing his earlier sternness. "Are you all right, sir?" Marcus nodded, though he was visibly shaken. "I'll be fine. Thank you, son. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in." A flicker of gratitude passed between them. James offered a slight bow. "I'm sorry I didn't act sooner. Protocol can tie our hands." Marcus attempted a smile. "I understand. You did more than enough." James nodded, taking a moment to steady his pulse. Around them, murmurs of surprise and admiration swirled through the gathering crowd. He heard someone say, "I've never seen a guard move from his post like that." Another whispered, "He saved that man's life." Marcus glanced down at his medals, adjusting one that had come loose. "These represent times I stood up for others. Thank you for standing up for me." James placed a gentle hand on the old man's shoulder. "You've earned that respect." Neither of them knew how this bold action might affect James's standing within the Royal Guard. All they knew was that, for now, they had done what was right. And sometimes, that was all that mattered. James Holt didn't return to his post right away. After the thugs retreated, he stayed by Marcus Turner's side, making sure the old man wasn't too shaken to walk on his own. Onlookers murmured with a mix of curiosity and admiration. Some came forward to check on Marcus, offering water or a place to sit. Others snapped photos of James, fascinated that a royal guard had broken formation so decisively. "Are you sure you're all right?" James asked, scanning Marcus's face. "Yes," Marcus replied. He patted down his jacket, relieved to find his medals still in place. "Thank you again." "I don't know what got into those men." James nodded, though a note of worry tugged at him. The group had seemed hostile for no clear reason. Something about them lingered in his mind. Maybe it was the way they sneered at those medals, or how their leader threatened to steal one. James couldn't shake the idea that they might come back. He promised himself he would keep watch for any sign of trouble. Moments later, a fellow guard approached. His eyes darted between James and Marcus. "We need to speak with you," he told James in a quiet, urgent tone. He glanced at Marcus sympathetically. "I'm glad you're safe, sir," he said to him, then turned back to James. "But the captain wants a word. Protocol's been broken." James felt a jolt of anxiety. He had known the risk. Stepping away from his post without explicit orders went against everything drilled into them during training. He looked at Marcus, who caught the shift in his expression. "Go," Marcus said, offering a soft smile. "I'll be fine. You have your duties." James hesitated, worried about leaving Marcus alone in case those men lingered nearby. But the older man nodded reassuringly. A few concerned bystanders remained around them, forming a small protective circle. James exhaled, straightening his shoulders. "All right," he said. "If you need anything, I know where to find you." Marcus finished, tapping his cane gently on the ground. Reluctantly, James followed his fellow guard. They wove through a group of tourists until they reached a discreet side entrance. There, Captain Leslie Quinn awaited them, her posture stiff. She wore a stern expression that made James's stomach twist. He stood at attention, preparing for a reprimand. "You broke ranks," Captain Quinn said, her voice steady but tinged with disapproval. "Explain yourself." James inhaled slowly. "I witnessed a civilian, an elderly veteran, being harassed. He was in immediate danger. I acted to protect him." Quinn's gaze flicked toward a window overlooking the courtyard. "I understand what you did," she replied. "But the rules about leaving your post exist for a reason. We cannot maintain order if everyone decides to intervene whenever they see trouble." She paused. "Still, you prevented an assault. That merits acknowledgement." James lowered his head. "I take full responsibility." "You'll be placed under review," Quinn said, maintaining her calm tone. "Your actions will be evaluated. In the meantime, you'll continue your duties, but you'll be monitored. Is that clear?" "Yes, ma'am." He expected nothing less. She nodded. "You may go. But heed this warning. Next time, think carefully." James bit back a reply. He understood Quinn's position, but protecting Marcus felt like the only right choice. With a final salute, he left the small office. As he stepped back into the courtyard, a wave of conflicting emotions washed over him: relief at not being punished more severely, concern for his future, and lingering worry about Marcus. Later that day, once he was off duty, James decided to look for Marcus. The palace grounds were vast, but he guessed the old man wouldn't venture too far after such a scare. Eventually, he found him resting on a wooden bench near a quiet walkway. Marcus looked up, eyes brightening as James approached. "Glad to see you again," Marcus said, shifting his cane to make room. "I was hoping we could talk." James sat down, keeping a respectful distance. "How are you feeling?" "A bit rattled," Marcus admitted. "But I've been through worse." He tapped the largest medal on his jacket. "These aren't just decorations. They carry memories of conflict. Bullets. Scrapes with death. I never expected to face hostility here, though, of all places." James frowned. "I'm sorry this happened near the palace. It's supposed to be a safe area." Marcus waved it off. "You did your duty, son. I wanted to thank you properly. And also," he hesitated, searching for the right words, "I'd like to know if you'll face any trouble for what you did." A shadow crossed James's face. "I'll be reviewed. Possibly a reprimand. But I'll handle it." Marcus pursed his lips. "It's not fair that doing the right thing might cost you." "It's how it is," James replied. "I knew that when I stepped away from my post." Marcus gave a small, approving nod. "You remind me of an officer I served with years ago. He always said, 'A soldier stands for more than the rules. He stands for people.' It seems you share that philosophy." James felt a surge of pride, though he didn't show it outwardly. "Thank you. That means a lot." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Marcus gazed at the palace walls, as if lost in distant memories. James used the pause to gather his thoughts. A question burned in his mind: who were those men, and why did they target Marcus? It could have been random, but his gut told him otherwise. Eventually, James spoke. "Did you know those men?" Marcus shook his head. "Never seen them before. But I got the sense they weren't just random troublemakers. They seemed organized. Though I can't be certain." James nodded. "I had the same feeling. Something about their coordination. They might have scouted you out, noticed your medals. Maybe they thought you'd have money." Marcus shrugged. "Could be. But I don't keep much cash on me." He gave a wry smile. "At my age, I can't carry large sums anyway. Too heavy for these old bones." James managed a faint chuckle. The momentary levity faded when he recalled the hateful look in the men's eyes. "If you need anything, please come to the guard station. I'll do my best to help." Marcus tapped his cane softly on the ground. "I appreciate that. And who knows? Maybe I'll stop by just to chat. Old soldiers get lonely sometimes." James reached out and gently squeezed Marcus's arm. "You're welcome any time." They parted ways as evening approached. James returned to his quarters, thinking about the day's events. The sense of duty he felt ran deeper than palace protocol. He couldn't shake a nagging feeling that the confrontation wasn't over, that those men might seek revenge, or that Marcus could still be at risk. Yet all he could do was remain alert and hope the palace investigation didn't weigh too heavily against him. That night, James's sleep was restless. He tossed and turned, replaying the moment he broke formation, the look in the thug's eyes, and Marcus's grateful expression. In a dream, he saw the palace corridor transformed into a long, winding battlefield. Marcus appeared at the far end, medals glinting, calling out for help. James tried to run toward him but found his feet stuck, as if he were trapped in quicksand. He woke with a jolt, heart pounding. The next morning, James stood at attention in the training yard, awaiting further instructions from his superiors. Some guards gave him curious looks, aware of the rumors spreading about his decision to intervene. Others offered subtle nods of respect. He accepted both reactions with a calm expression, determined to carry on without resentment. During a break in drills, his friend and fellow guard, Ava Sinclair, pulled him aside. "I heard what happened," she said in a low voice. "Is it true you fought off 4 men?" James sighed. "They weren't exactly martial arts experts. But yes, it was 4. Ava's eyes sparked with admiration. "That's courageous, but you know how strict the captain is." James gave a rueful shrug. "I did what I had to do." Ava shook her head. "You always were the stubborn one. Keep your guard up, literally and figuratively. Word is those guys might have connections. And the palace wants to avoid bad press." James stiffened. "Connections? With who?" She glanced around to make sure no one overheard. "Some local crime group. I'm not certain. Just be careful." He nodded. Ava hurried away, called over by another officer. Alone again, James stared at the courtyard walls, mind whirling. If the men had criminal ties, Marcus could still be in danger. And James might find himself caught between official rules and the urge to protect someone who had already endured enough hardship. He resolved to follow his instinct, no matter the consequences. Marcus Turner deserved better than to live in fear. And James Holt would not stand by while danger threatened a man who had given his youth for the safety of others. James Holt finished his morning drills under a gray sky that threatened rain. As he returned to the guard station, his mind drifted back to the conversation with Ava Sinclair about the thugs. He couldn't shake the idea that Marcus Turner might still be at risk. The palace was supposed to symbolize safety, yet danger lurked just outside its gates. Inside the station, James heard a soft knock on the door. When he opened it, Marcus stood there, leaning on his cane. He looked a bit weary, but otherwise in good spirits. "Morning, son," Marcus said, tipping his head. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," James replied. He gestured for Marcus to come in. Everything all right? Marcus settled into a chair, adjusting his cane. I'd like to say yes, he answered, but I've had this uneasy feeling since the other day. James frowned. Did something happen? Marcus sighed. Not yet. But someone's been hanging around my neighborhood, asking questions. Neighbors said they saw unfamiliar faces lingering near my building. A knot of worry formed in James's chest. It could be the men from before, he said quietly. Or people connected to them. Marcus nodded. That's what I'm afraid of. I'm not as quick on my feet these days. James crossed his arms, thinking fast. The palace might not be able to provide official protection for one man with no direct link to a major crime, but that didn't mean James had to stand idle. Have you gone to the local authorities? I tried, Marcus said, exhaling wearily. They took my statement, but without solid evidence, they can't do much. In their words, we'll keep an eye out. James understood the limitations of the system. Still, the idea of Marcus alone in his apartment, while possible threats lurked outside, made him uneasy. Is there anyone who can stay with you? Marcus shrugged. I live by myself. Don't have many family members left. James grabbed a notepad from the desk. Give me your address. I can at least drive by after my shift. Marcus smiled, relief evident on his face. I appreciate that. Didn't want to trouble you, but you're the only person I trust right now. James felt a wave of resolve. He jotted down Marcus's address. I'm not certain what I can do under official guidelines, but I'm not going to let them hurt you. Marcus placed a hand over James's, voice low with gratitude. Thank you. Just then, a commotion sounded from outside the station. Someone was shouting James's name. He and Marcus exchanged looks before stepping out to see what was happening. Ava Sinclair hurried over, concern etched on her face. James, the captain wants us in the courtyard. Now. She paused when she saw Marcus. Sir, you might want to stay back. This could be dangerous. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Dangerous how? Ava hesitated, glancing at James. A few men are causing a disturbance at the main entrance. They're demanding to speak to the guard who assaulted them. James's heart thudded. The men had returned, and they wanted revenge, or at least a confrontation. He glanced at Marcus, whose lips pressed into a thin line. I'm coming, Marcus said, voice firm. James shook his head. It could escalate. I don't want you caught up in another confrontation. I won't hide, Marcus countered. Not after what they did. If they want to threaten me, let them say it to my face. Ava opened her mouth to protest, but Marcus's resolve was clear. Reluctantly, they accompanied him to the courtyard, where a small crowd had formed. At the center stood three of the thugs from before, minus the tall ringleader. They had the nerve to stand inside palace grounds, spouting accusations and demanding justice. A few officers looked on warily, unsure of how to proceed. That's him, one thug said, pointing an angry finger the instant he spotted James. He attacked us without reason? James lifted his chin. You harassed a veteran, he said flatly. If you call that no reason, I disagree. The thug sneered. We were just talking. He overreacted. Captain Leslie Quinn appeared, flanked by two other guards. She studied the men. You're trespassing on restricted grounds. State your business clearly or leave. One of the men smirked. We want an apology. And maybe some compensation. Our friend got hurt. James struggled to keep his temper in check. Hurt while assaulting an old man? The thug clenched his fists. He wasn't innocent. We were just... Suddenly Marcus stepped forward. You were what? He demanded, voice trembling with anger. Tearing off my medals? Shoving me around? Is that your idea of just talking? The thugs exchanged wary glances. One of them mumbled. Shut up, old man. Marcus jabbed his cane against the ground. No. I've lived too long to be silenced by punks. You want an apology? From James Holt? You must be out of your mind. A ripple of approval went through some of the guards watching. James placed a hand lightly on Marcus's shoulder, as if to steady him. "They're trying to twist the story," he said to Quinn. "They came looking for trouble." Quinn looked at the thugs. "Why did you come here? This is a royal facility. You're not welcome without clearance." One thug hesitated, then tried to sound confident. "We just want it on record that your guard attacked us. Either you discipline him, or we'll take this to the media." James's jaw tightened. Threatening media coverage was a low tactic, but it could cause a public relations problem for the palace. Quinn's expression suggested she was weighing the possibility. At that moment, Ava Sinclair stepped in. "Ma'am, we have statements from witnesses who saw them harassing Mr. Turner. We also have security footage from the courtyard that day." She glanced at James. "If the palace chooses, we can release evidence proving these men were the aggressors." The thugs paled. Clearly, they hadn't counted on the possibility of camera footage. One of them stammered. We didn't do anything that bad." Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh. "Not bad? Mocking medals, shoving an old soldier to the ground, threatening me again just now. Want me to keep going?" Quinn lifted a hand. "Enough. You have 5 seconds to leave before I charge you with trespassing on royal property. If you have a complaint, file it through proper legal channels. But you're not going to intimidate one of my guards or this veteran." Glares flashed across the men's faces, but they knew they were outnumbered. After a tense pause, they turned and stomped off, muttering curses. 2 guards trailed them to ensure they actually left. The assembled onlookers breathed easier. Marcus's shoulders slumped once they were gone. James put an arm around him, concerned. "Are you all right, Mr. Turner?" "I'm fine," Marcus said softly. "Just angry. They have no respect for anything." Captain Quinn cleared her throat. "Mr. Turner, I'm sorry you had to deal with that again. And you," she said, looking at James. "Consider yourself still under review, but I'm beginning to see your point. Sometimes protocol isn't enough." James nodded. "I appreciate you understanding, ma'am." She dismissed the guards, then turned to Marcus. "We'll keep an eye out for them, sir. And if they show up again, notify us immediately." Marcus managed a weary smile. "I will. Thank you." As people dispersed, James caught the uneasy look on Marcus's face. He recognized it as fear, masked by bravado. "I can walk you out," James offered, voice quiet so others wouldn't hear. Marcus nodded, grateful. Side by side, they moved through the palace courtyard. James tried not to think about the next steps. The thug's appearance in broad daylight hinted at something bigger, maybe an organized effort to discredit James or harass Marcus. Once they reached the entrance, Marcus paused. "I won't let them scare me away from coming here," he said, looking at the palace. "I served my country for decades. I've earned the right to visit any public place I want." James nodded, respect shining in his eyes. "You have, sir. And I'll do what I can to make sure you can do so safely." "Thank you," Marcus said. Then thugs he harassed a 91-year-old veteran, but they didn't knew a royal guard was watching admiration and worry swirling inside. He resolved that, if the men tried anything else, he'd protect Marcus again, rules or no rules. Yet a nagging doubt clung to him. The threat wasn't over, not by a long shot. James Holt spent the next few days on edge. The thugs who had confronted Marcus Turner in broad daylight might have left, but the threat still lingered. Every time James took his post, he scanned the bustling crowds, half expecting them to reappear. Meanwhile, Captain Leslie Quinn quietly authorized more discreet patrols around Marcus's neighborhood. Yet no one spotted the men. That changed late one afternoon when James received a flustered call from Marcus. "They're at my apartment building again," Marcus said, voice tense. "Neighbors saw them lurking by the back entrance." James's pulse spiked. "Stay inside," he urged. "I'm coming right now." He rushed to get permission from Quinn. She hesitated at first, aware of the protocol he was about to bend yet again. But when James insisted that Marcus's life might be in immediate danger, she relented. "Go," she said, her expression grim. "We'll dispatch backup." James sped across town, heart pounding. By the time he arrived, the sun was sliding below the skyline, casting long shadows on the street. He parked near Marcus's building and hurried inside. Anxious neighbors directed him to the rear stairwell, saying they'd heard hushed voices echoing in the dark. He found Marcus in the hallway outside his apartment, cane in hand. "You shouldn't be out here," James whispered. Marcus shook his head. "I won't stay locked inside. This is my home." Their conversation cut short when footsteps creaked on the landing below. A faint curse reached their ears, followed by the same jeering tone James recognized from the palace courtyard. The thugs. They were searching for Marcus's door. James motioned for Marcus to stand to one side. Slowly, quietly, they descended the steps, hearts thudding in unison. The stairwell light flickered, revealing two of the same men who had confronted them before. Their backs turned, they didn't see James and Marcus approach until it was too late. "You picked the wrong place," James said, voice echoing in the cramped stairwell. The men spun, startled. One lunged at James with a desperate swing. James dodged, hooking the attacker's arm and slamming him against the wall with a controlled force that left him gasping. The second thug cursed, trying to flee, but Marcus, steadying himself, tapped his cane loudly on the floor. "Going somewhere?" the old veteran said, voice stronger than James had ever heard. The sudden distraction gave James just enough time to intercept the fleeing man. Within moments, James had both pinned. Marcus, breathing heavily but standing firm, nodded in approval. Sirens wailed outside as police and backup from the palace converged, the echo of their approach bouncing off brick walls. That night, local authorities arrested the thugs and questioned them for hours. They finally confessed to harassing Marcus on orders from a small-time crime ring, apparently hoping to blackmail him, or scare him into silence for some twisted reason. Now, with evidence and a clear chain of events, the men faced serious charges. A wave of relief washed over Marcus. James sensed it too, though he couldn't fully relax yet. In the days that followed, the police rounded up other associates linked to the same group. The immediate threat to Marcus was gone. For the first time in weeks, the old veteran could walk outside without fearing every footstep behind him. A week later, the palace courtyard bustled with activity. Rows of chairs faced a temporary platform, where Captain Quinn stood at a podium. Journalists snapped photos, while onlookers chatted in hushed excitement. At precisely noon, the ceremony began. "Ladies and gentlemen," Quinn announced, "we are here to recognize two individuals whose courage reminds us that duty is more than ceremony. Royal Guard James Holt risked his position to protect Mr. Marcus Turner, a 91-year-old veteran with a lifetime of service. By working together, they helped the authorities apprehend those who threatened our public peace." Applause broke out. James, standing off to one side in full uniform, felt a lump in his throat. He glanced at Marcus, who was seated in the front row, cane resting beside him. Their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement of everything they'd been through. Quinn signaled James to step forward. "Guard Holt, you have shown that protocol should never override moral duty. For your bravery and unwavering commitment, the palace bestows upon you a commendation for outstanding conduct." James bowed his head as Quinn pinned a shining emblem onto his uniform. Cameras flashed. The crowd cheered. But the moment wasn't done. Next, Quinn turned to Marcus. "Mr. Turner, your own service to our country spans decades, and even now, you displayed remarkable resolve in standing up to those who sought to harm you. In gratitude, we honor you with a medal reflecting not just your past sacrifices, but also your recent actions in helping ensure the public's safety." Marcus stood, voice trembling with emotion as he addressed the audience. "I fought for this country so many years ago, never expecting that I'd have to fight again at this age. But thanks to James Holt and the support of the palace, I'm reminded that honor and duty are values we carry with us for life." Quinn pinned the medal onto Marcus's jacket, right beside the older ribbons he wore so proudly. The applause redoubled. Some onlookers whistled, others dabbed at their eyes. Marcus turned to James, offering a salute. James returned it, posture ramrod straight, a profound respect passing between them. After the ceremony, well-wishers approached, shaking hands and snapping photos. Marcus chatted with a small group of veterans who recognized his medals. James accepted shy congratulations from the public, many of whom confessed they never realized that a guard's duty might include risking reputation, and possibly career, to do what was right. Finally, as the crowd began to thin, Captain Quinn gently placed a hand on James's shoulder. "Resume your post," she said, her voice softer than usual. "You've proven your worth. The palace stands behind you." James nodded, gratitude swelling in his chest. "Thank you, Captain." Marcus, leaning on his cane, made his way over. He paused at James's side. "So this is it? You're back to standing guard?" James offered a quiet smile. "My job is to protect, sir. It's not just about standing at attention, it's about being ready when people need help." Marcus's eyes glimmered with pride. "You'll do great, son. And if I ever swing by again, I'll tip my hat to the guard who showed me real courage still exists." They exchanged a firm handshake. Marcus tapped his cane on the cobblestones and stepped back, giving James room to return to duty. Before leaving, the old veteran turned around, straightened his spine, and saluted the palace one more time, an homage to the place he once defended and the guard who had now defended him. James moved to his assigned spot at the gate, standing tall and resolute in the afternoon sun. Tourists would soon wander by, snapping pictures, unaware of the drama that had unfolded just days before. Yet James himself would always remember the choices he made and the vows he upheld. As the clock struck the hour, James Holt resumed his station with a renewed sense of pride, a visible symbol of discipline, protection, and unwavering duty. Far in the distance, Marcus Turner strode away, his medals catching the light, his spirit unbroken, his safety secured, his faith and honor rekindled. In that final tableau, the bond between a royal guard and an aging veteran stood as a testament to what courage could accomplish.